Man, that last episode of the CRM MVP podcast was awesome. Thank you, Megan, so much for hosting the show and telling us all about Forms Pro. Today, we're hosting episode number 59. And for this episode, I actually received some inspiration from the video that I recorded with Seth Bacon talking about everything that you need to do in order to become a solution architect. And, the video has received, as of now, about 600 to 700 views, something like that. I haven't checked on the last couple of days, but a lot of comments about it. A lot of people talking about, the video, talking about whether, what we talked about inspire them to become an MVP, not an MVP, rather a solution architect. Some people reach out to me privately on LinkedIn talking about how you wanted to make a switch from whatever you were doing, which is not potentially technical in the realm of Dynamics 365, and wanting to make a transition and being a solution architect. So for those people that were inspired by the video and want to, take on that challenge to become a solution architect, I'm proud of you. Good job. Thank you. I'm looking forward to, seeing where your progress goes. And I think some of the questions that I've received from the video were about clarification also on the things that you need to know in order to be able to call yourself a solution architect. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, like when I think about all of the different things that are out there, all of the different, things that you could learn in order to be a solution architect, there are some things that you must know. You need to know these things if you want to call yourself a solution architect. And it's interesting because sometimes I see people that will give themselves the title of solution architect, and that when you talk to them, they clearly are not a solution architect, at least not based on the levels that I'm setting myself personally as a solution architect. Just like I imagine that some people would disagree with me in my levels, right? And maybe they even think I'm not even a solution architect based on their own standards. But I have seen some people, like for example, they would be developers, and they would say that they're a solution architect, right? When somebody asks a question like, is anyone here a solution architect? They'll raise their hand and be like, I'm a solution architect. I'm also a developer. They're not both the same thing though. And I've also seen people that, for example, were CRM administrators at the company they were working for, and then they apply for jobs as solution architects. Well, the skills and the knowledge that you have as a CRM administrator are not all translatable to being a solution architect. So I wanted to kind of put a list together of what, according to me, Gus Gonzalez, here are the top 10 things solution architects must know. Like, these are the things that you have to know very, very well. Now, obviously, solution architects need to know dozens of things. They need to know hundreds of things, right? There's a lot to learn. And there are some things, I really struggle. I wrote about, I would say about 18 or something on this list. And then I had to go back and kind of remove some of the things that I disagree with not being in the top 10. It was pretty tough. Like, I'll give you one, for example. I'll throw in, for example, that it didn't make my top 10, which is training. If you know me, you know how important training is for me. And training was on the list, and it didn't even make the cut for the top 10 things that you need to know as a solution architect. You need to know how to deliver training. But do you though? Like, I think that you could be a successful solution architect and not really be the best at training, or be really good at training. Because if we're going to measure solution architecture success with, my bar, which is the solution is effective and the users adopt it because it's effective and the business uses it. If that's the bar of success that we're going to set up, then I don't think you need to be an expert trainer, even though I hate it because it's my passion. You guys know me, you know how much I value training and being really good at teaching people how to use something new that perhaps they weren't really expecting they had to learn how to use. But that one didn't even make it, right? I had to narrow it down to 10, and here they are. And these are in no order, no particular order. I appreciate that Megan took time last time to put it together in order and say number one is the most important one for her, even though I think that there were a couple of of items on the list that she mentioned. This is number 4 or 5, but it could be number one. I just put them up in order. I think these are equally important, all of them. And I know you will disagree with me, but these are my top 10 things solution architect must know. And if you're a solution architect and you're really weak in one of these areas, I recommend that you work on them. I think that working on them will make you a better solution architect. So let's get to the list. I have no idea how long this episode is going to be, but what I'll tell you though is that there are two sides to this coin. When I was thinking about ideas for this episode, when I was thinking about what to talk about, there are two sides to it. One is the top 10 things you need to know as a solution architect. And the other thing is the top 10 overrated things the solution architects know or think they need to know that I think are overrated. I don't think you should invest time on them, or at least not try to become an expert at it. I just don't think is important or consequential to your success as a solution architect. That will be episode 60. So I typically don't give any spoilers or tell people exactly what I'm going to be talking about in the next episode, but I wanted to mention that this one is a part 1 of 2 series on solution architecture. So one of them today, things you need to know. Next episode in 2 weeks, things that are overrated. So let's get started with our top 10 things solution architects must know. All right, number 1 on the list of top 10 things solution architects must know is Dynamics 365 primary apps, right? The out-of-the-box applications that Microsoft releases. Now, this one right off the back, I think some people will disagree with me. I think people will say that with the rise of model-driven applications and power apps, model-driven power apps, you would say that you don't need to know the primary apps. You can just build them from scratch. But I disagree. I don't think that's the case. And I know that I've recorded episodes before, or most successful episodes so far, the one that people have listened to the most and asked the most questions about and kind of give us the most praise is Dynamics 365 it's dead as we know it, I think it's called, or done as we know it. It's the end of Dynamics 365 as we know it, I think is the title of it. Episode 51, I believe, something like that. And, you know, on that episode, we talk about the fact that nowadays, you don't have to start with a primary app, so you can configure and create your own application from scratch. And you heard from Steve Mordew, a CRM MVP, that he talked about the fact that every single one of the projects they do, it's with a model-driven application. They never start with a primary application. So that would lead you to believe that you don't need to really know the primary applications anymore. And I totally disagree. I think that this is a must know. You have to know it. Even if you work for ForceWorks, even if you work for Steve Mordew, you need to know primary applications. And the reason for that is that I don't think you can be an effective solution architect. I don't think you can be successful at creating a solution if you don't know what Microsoft has created for it already, if you can't really leverage what's out of the box. And this one goes together, by the way, with number 2, which is going to be licensing. And we're going to talk about licensing in a second. But I think that you need to know, it's a must-have. You need to know the primary applications. Now, you don't need to know in detail the extended capabilities of it. For example, I don't think you need to know in detail what can be done with orders and invoices, simply because I believe that when it comes to sales, orders and invoices are something that is handled on the back office. It's handled by the ERP system, your accounting system. That is the software essentially that you use to generate orders, to fulfill orders, to send invoices, collect payments, keep track of accounting and all of that. That's what it's used for that. So you don't need to be an expert and understand that invoices can have up to 5 different statuses. Like, you don't need to know those things, but you absolutely need to know the primary entities, which I call the COLA entities, right? Contacts, opportunities, leads, accounts, like those entities. You have to know what's out there. You have to know what's possible with it. You just have to know it. If you don't know out of the box primary applications, you cannot call yourself a Dynamics 365 solution architect. That's just my opinion. I think you could stretch this. You could even stretch it to say that you need to know beyond Dynamics 365 out of the box capabilities. For example, you could add, and this could be an argument. I'm a little bit more flexible on this one. I'm completely inflexible on the primary applications, not willing to negotiate whatsoever on that. But I will be flexible, but strongly feel in favor of you knowing what's possible in other Microsoft business solutions like Office 365, for example, understanding what SharePoint can do. You don't need to be an expert in SharePoint. What Exchange can do, you don't need to be an expert in Exchange. What can you do with Microsoft Teams? What can you do with some of these other cloud solutions that are also sold in the same platform? The Dynamics 365 is sold, the online platform for Microsoft. And it's interesting because I will tackle a few of these on the overrated skills too. So on the next episode, you'll see kind of the other side of the coin, because there are some things Microsoft sells to that platform that people know about and solution architects know about, and I think it's totally overrated that you know about those things. But again, episode 60, so stay tuned for that. Going back to primary applications and going back to why you need to know that, I think that it is irresponsible for you as a solution architect to begin a project from scratch, knowing that you will be creating functionality that is, I don't know, 80%, 90% similar to what a primary application will do it. Whether you do it because you don't know primary applications and you just know how to build stuff, so you will create a model-driven application for it, or whether you do it because, nobody really, this is a statement that I hear over and over and over, and I've said it before too, but nobody uses out-of-the-box functionality as is. Well, I mean, it's hard, just channeling my inner Gustav, it's hard to say no one in the world uses out-of-the-box functionality. I don't think that's true. I think that my fear with it, and I think this is where I'm going. I'm rambling about this. This could be a 30-second thing, just me saying that you have to know primary applications and moving on, because it's, for me, is very, very important. But I think what I'm rambling about is the fact that there is extended functionality out there that only works with the out-of-the-box primary applications, or that if you're going to make it work with a third-party solution that you have created as a model-driven application, I think that you would run the risk of A, causing problems that the customer is going to have to deal with, B, not being able to use the full functionality that was designed for, or C, not even be able to present that or include that in your solution, because now you're stuck since you have to create it yourself. So things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, things like organization insights, things like whatever has to do with, IP that Microsoft has created directly working with the primary applications. Can you use the LinkedIn Sales Navigator with third-party applications? Like if you don't want to, drop it on a lead entity, for example, if you don't want to drop it on opportunities and things like that. Yes, technically, because model-driven applications include accounts and contacts, you can use some of the functionality. But is it ideal though? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that you have to be responsible and understand what's out of the box. And I mean, I'm not a complete 100% Microsoft fanboy here saying that, Microsoft has designed the smartest and most perfect solutions ever. No, because they're not perfect, because we customize them all the time, every time we implement it. But to completely ignore it and just start from scratch every time, no matter what, I think is irresponsible. I think that you need to know the primary applications. You need to consider them as part of your solution. And if your solution then, is creating from scratch instead of using out of the box, then so be it. But at least you do it knowing what the primary applications can do. I don't think you can call yourself a solution architect if every solution you design doesn't consider what primary applications can do. I think that you should know that, and that should be part of your solution. Now, I'm going to say that from my perspective, I find it less and less likely for me to use the primary applications, right? It's less and less likely because I look at the solution, I look at the effort it would take to hide the stuff that doesn't work or customize it to do what we need it to do. And I think that the effort is sometimes the same or smaller to just build what you need from scratch. So I'm on Steve's side 100% from that perspective. But I do that because I know what the primary applications can do. and I know that there's a lot of work needed to make it work the way I want it. So I'm making a conscious decision based on that. All right, time to move to number 2, which is licensing, as I mentioned earlier. I don't think you can call yourself a solution architect if you don't understand licensing. And I totally get the fact that Microsoft has what appears to be a squad of full-time people trying to make licensing more complicated. I mean, honestly, when have they released a licensing guide that is smaller than the last one they released? When was that? Like a decade ago? Like I don't even know if that's even existed, because licensing went from a flat rate. If you've been working with Dynamics CRM for long enough, like I have, you know that back in the day, when 2008 to I would say 2010, 2011, something like that, the early days of CRM Online and CRM On-Prem for that matter, licensing was pretty simple. They sold you one type of license, which it was just, I don't know if it was called Enterprise. I don't remember the name of it. I think it's called Professional, actually. And you pay a flat rate and everybody got everything. And obviously they sold it with the idea that, look what we do. You pay one flat rate and you get access to everything. You don't need to pay extra. You don't need to add on or try to figure out what you need and you don't need. We're better than Salesforce. We're better than everyone, where you have to figure this out and then have to price it accordingly. We don't do any of that. Cool, that was a hook. And I believe it was like $44 per user per month back in the day. I don't know if it was like 30 first and then 44 after that, but it was 44 for the longest time. Then after that, it went up to 65. I remember that was the first increase, which is when Microsoft introduced the mobile client. But it was still a flat rate. Then they introduce Enterprise when they add on the idea that you now have access to Parature and you had access to just a bunch of other stuff. And then they came up with Basic, I think it was. And then was the one, I don't remember if it was called Essentials. Like somebody please drop a comment below on the show and let me know. I think it was called Essentials, where it was like the first time that we got a glimpse of what became what we have today, which is team member license or something like that. It was like a very, very basic license that costed, almost nothing. And it was, again, meant to be for users that only needed essentially read-only access. Okay, so that's when it started getting complicated. It was like 4 levels. It was Essential, I think it was. Again, Basic, which was $30 per user per month. It gave you access to some entities. Then you had Professional, which was access to everything. And then you got Enterprise, which gave you access to Parature and Dynamics Marketing and like some of the other applications. None of them exist today. They're all gone. But it gave you access to everything. And then after that, they changed everything once again to introduce plans and apps and all the stuff that we kind of have today. I don't know if we can call it Plan 1 anymore for Enterprise. We have Plan 1 and Plan 2. Plan 2 gave you access to the ERP side, which I haven't done a project. Maybe you have done a bunch, but I haven't done a project where I've had any user that needs Plan 2. Plus, you had a minimum. I think you had to buy 20 in order to be able to even get it. So I've never done a project in a company that is so large that would qualify for P2 licenses for Dynamics 365. So I never sold one of those. It's always Plan 1, which is access to everything. It was the equivalent of Professional, right? And then Team Member came out and all of that. And I mean, it's like every time they release a licensing guide, it's bigger and more complicated than the previous one. It keeps getting more complicated and more complicated. And I feel that, obviously, I think that it's wrong for me to say that Microsoft is just sitting like, let's just make this super complicated. Like, I don't think they're doing that. Obviously, they're making changes to account for, situations where customers, longstanding customers of Microsoft have reached back out with concerns about, the fact that those changes that have been introduced affected them negatively, and Microsoft taking a step back and thinking about it and making adjustments for those customers. They also have to make adjustments for customers that abuse systems where you have essentially unlimited access to stuff, or maybe not unlimited, but it's supposed to be limited, but people don't Microsoft doesn't put holds on it. It's sort of like honor based. So because of that, they abuse. Like I can see how they have to introduce limitations and complexities and amendments to their licensing to account for that. But the problem is, and the reason why licensing is number two, is because for you as a solution architect, if you don't know what kind of licenses your customers bought, and now we have to account for flow licensing, Power Apps licenses, all that stuff, depending on what your solution looks like. If you don't know what your customers bought, then I honestly have no idea how you can create a solution, not even an effective solution, but a solution, okay? Any solution. So understanding licensing, at least the technical side of it, understanding that your customer just made an investment of buying 200 Power Apps Plan 2 licenses. Understanding that you cannot mix and match those with team member licenses, for example. Understanding your customer just bought 50 P2s and 100 P1 licenses for Power Apps. Knowing that you cannot use any of the primary functionality and everything will have to be created now on top of CDS and the Power Platform. Understanding those things is what helps you or even enables you to create a solution. So I'm always blown away when I meet solution architects out there and they have no idea what's included in any of the licenses, right? And I mentioned like, what's included in P2? What's included in P1? Do we have access to, can we do this? Can we do that? Like I am blown away. And I'm not an expert in licensing by any means. Understanding licensing doesn't mean you need to be an expert in licensing. I don't even know if that exists. I don't even know if out there's someone who's an expert in licensing that knows all the intricacies. Because I'll throw a simple question out at them and it will be like, I have no idea if that's possible or allowed with that particular license level or whatever it is. What if I have a user that has P2 and they want to use LinkedIn Sales Navigator? How do you do that? I don't know. Like I'm saying, it's really, really complicated to find a licensing expert, right? And I don't think you have to be an expert to be a solution architect, but you have to have some understanding. You have to understand the limitations out there. And, for the weird, complex situations, then you can ask. You can ask Microsoft. You can ask other MVPs. You can ask questions out there. When you find those rare situations where you might not have a clear answer, but knowing whether you can use the opportunity entity with a Plan 2 license for Power Apps or not, you need to know those things, and you need to know what your customer bought, and you need to be able to even advise them, because in some cases, depending on the company you work for, by the time you engage with a customer as a solution architect, they have already bought this stuff. They already bought it. You don't have to help them. They don't have to make a decision on it. They already have it. So you're not advising them on it. But in some companies, like not only at the company I currently work for, Elevate Solutions, but also the company I was with before, and perhaps the one before that even, some of the customers, you're talking to them at their prospect stage, and they're asking questions about, hey, here's our situation. We're coming from CRM on-prem. We're coming from Salesforce. We're coming from whatever. Do you think we will need what license based on our requirement do you think we'll need to buy? And it's an important answer that you need to be able to answer that, because you need to be able to see what they have and quickly determine if this is something you can resolve by building something from scratch with a Power Apps Plan 2 license, which costs almost a third of what Dynamics 365 full access to the primary apps license will cost you. So you need to know those things. All right. Number 3 is advanced customization and configuration. You need to know that very well. And it's always mind-blowing to me where I meet solution architects that don't know, some basic customization and configuration. Like I've known solution architects. They're like, oh, I've been a solution architect for 2 years, and they don't understand, let's say, relationship behavior between entities. They don't know where that is. I've seen questions about adding mappings, right, to relationships that, solution architects don't understand. Like, how do you transfer data from one entity to another? You just add a field to the mapping on the relationships. Like, what? Really? just simple stuff like that. They don't understand what's possible out of the box. So I think that as a solution architect, even if you don't do the work, even if you're not the one actually adding the fields and the entities and all that stuff, you need to know how to do it. Right? It's kind of like, I guess, like doctors, right? If you're a doctor, you need to know how to be able to inject a patient, right? Give it a shot. Even though most of the time, if you visit a doctor's office, like the nurse will be the one doing that. Like if you need to get your blood drawn, it will be a nurse doing that or another person. It won't be the doctor, but the doctor should know how to do that, right? So the same thing I think happens to the solution architect. A solution architect needs to have expert or advanced level of customization and configuration. What's possible to do in Dynamics, even if the work is not done by that solution architect. I again, I cannot imagine being able to call myself a solution architect if I don't know how to customize Dynamics 365. I just and let's even push it further. Let's even push it further. I'm going to include Power Apps. Power Apps is number 4 on the list. Understanding Power Apps and customizing Power Apps is part of that. And I don't think you need to necessarily have advanced level of customization configuration for everything you can do with Power Apps or the Power Platform. Let's just extend it to the Power Platform with Flow and Power BI. And we will talk about Power BI in a second. But I think that you need to know what's possible, right, with that functionality. I cannot call myself an expert in Canvas apps because I haven't created enough for me to say, you know what, I got a pretty good hold on this. Anything you throw my way that can be done with Canvas apps, I can figure it out. I don't think I can do that. I cannot call myself an expert in Canvas apps, but I know what's possible with it. And I've taught people how I use Canvas apps, but I wouldn't call myself an expert on Canvas applications. Just like I wouldn't call myself an expert on everything that can be done with Dynamics 365 because you can code stuff and I'm not a developer. So do I know every single thing that is possible to be created in Dynamics 365? Absolutely not. Do I know most things you can do out of the box? Yeah, I would say so. Like if I can count 100, let's say 0 to 100% of things you can do in Dynamics, I would say I know about 90% of things you can do customization and configuration. I'm going to say 90% because I don't know if there are some things out there that I didn't even know. There's always a margin for us to learn, right? I don't think anyone can go out there and say, I know 100% of everything you can customize and configure in Dynamics 365 because there will be some obscure things on settings and stuff that we've never used, right? So anyway, I'm just saying you need to have advanced level, right? Better than your regular administrator, better than your regular functional consultant that knows how to add fields and, knows how to add custom entities. You need to know everything, roll up fields, calculated fields, all the types of calculations you can do. You need to know workflows very well. Every single automation process you need to understand very well. Everything you can do to a form, multiple forms, security roles. You need to be very, very good at dealing with security, understanding performance implications by the way you set up security. So again, when I'm thinking about customization and configuration, I'm going all the way. I'm going to security. I'm going to business rules. I'm going to, entities and forms and fields and relationships and everything. You need to have an advanced knowledge of that, whether you do the work yourself or not. It doesn't matter. Next on the list, number 5 is business intelligence. Now, notice that I did not include Power BI by itself because I think business intelligence is beyond Power BI, in beyond charts and dashboards and everything else that's available out of the box with Dynamics 365. So if we're going to count charts and dashboards and reports and even the Excel templates, like print to Excel, I'm going to include those, and views even, because even views can be part of business intelligence. You need to know more than that. You need to understand how do you come up with KPIs or key performance indicators. You need to understand how you identify decision makers when it comes to creating business intelligence solutions for an organization. You need to know who your stakeholders are going to be. right? Who do you need to talk to if you need to create some business intelligence solution for salespeople, for customer service people, for outside sales reps, for whoever it is? Having the skills to identify what needs to be done from the business intelligence perspective is super important. Super important. Okay. So again, there's an episode we recorded. I think it was something like 17 or something like that, a long, long time ago. Me and Ulrich, the CRM chart guy, recorded an episode about business intelligence. You can go back and listen to that, where we dig in a little bit more on how of business intelligence, more than the what, more than talking about the tools themselves. So go and tune into that if you want more information. But you need to know business intelligence. You also need to know about data integrations. Now, this is more of the how rather than, rather than the technology itself. How data integrations can be leveraged as part of your solution. How can connecting to other systems and pulling information and sending information will help when it comes to designing an effective solution. Okay? Understanding data integrations, one way, two ways, real time, near real time, in batches, whether you're gonna, be connecting to another Microsoft solution or not, whether that solution is a proprietary solution, an in-house solution that is not available from the cloud or from the internet, right? If you're deploying CRM online, like you need to understand all of these repercussions. Now, you don't need to know exactly what tool should be used, what, programming language you need to use to create a plugin or whatever. You don't need to know those details. That's what we have developers for, technical architects for, technical consultants for. They need to know that. But you as a solution architect need to be able to say, look, I'm implementing a field service project, and whenever a work order is completed and marked by the field service technician, right, or the agent, and they go into their tablet or whatever and say, boom, this work is done, there has to be some integration that generates an invoice on the ERP system, and that has to be in real time. Or maybe we do it in batches at night and all the invoices go out in the morning. Whatever it is, that knowledge needs to come from the solution architect. Then a technical architect or a technical consultant will come and wire it up. They'll, use Kingsway. So whatever it is, however they do it is none of my business. I just need it to be done to be part of my solution. So once again, when it comes to data integrations, understanding how they can affect your solution, how they can be leveraged to create an important solution is more important than understanding the actual technology. Like, you don't need to be an expert with Smart Connect and Scribe and BizTalk and Kingswaysoft and Cozy Rock and all the Microsoft integration stuff from Power. You don't need to know all those things. And even Flow that can be used for some integrations. You don't need to know all of the technology. It will be good if you know it. And by the way, every single one of those things, or just because I don't have something on the list, it doesn't mean that you don't need to learn it, right? Like I said, training is not on the list, but doesn't mean you shouldn't know how to do training, that you should be bad at explaining things to other people. No, they're important, but it's not a must-have, right? So knowing the actual technology inside out. Do you have to be an expert in data integration technologies and SSIS in order for me is that a must-have knowledge? No. The answer is no. I don't think you have to have it. Number 7. We did a whole episode about this, by the way, episode number 10 with Clarissa Simpson, change management. You need to know change management. If you don't know, what are the techniques or ways in which you can help an organization change and adopt a new solution like the one that you're creating, then you cannot call yourself a solution architect. And I go back to, what is the mission of a solution architect? Again, in my opinion, the mission of a solution architect is to deliver and implement an effective solution with Dynamics 365 and all the other surrounding technologies. Power Platform technologies, other Microsoft technologies like, SharePoint, Exchange, whatever it is. That is my job. My job is to implement an effective solution, a solution that helps the business, a solution that users adopt and leverage because it helps them with their jobs. It helps them do more with less, right? It automates their process heavily, etc. That is my job as a solution architect. And if I think about that, If I think about implementing change in people's lives and work, well, you need to know change management. There's no other way around it. Um, on episode 10, we talk about ADKAR, right? Methodology from ProSci to implement change management. That's the one that I follow because I train on it, but there's a bunch of other ones out there. I did a presentation with Clarissa at the CRMUG Summit for change management. Essentially, how do you get 100% user adoption every time? And obviously, a big part of designing and implementing an effective solution that is big. And the second one is following a change management methodology. And I think on that presentation, we talked about 10 different methodologies and how they are all effective based on your organization, what you're trying to do. So again, I happen to, by accident, because I work with Microsoft a lot, and this is what Microsoft follows. By accident, I learned ProSci and ADKAR, and I fell in love with it. I think it's super effective, and I've been following ever since. But understanding change management, following a methodology, being really good at it is something that solution architects must have. Like, you just have to have it. If you are awful at helping organizations going through change and adopting a solution that you have created, well, it doesn't matter if you win the Nobel Prize of CRMing. It doesn't matter because your solution won't be adopted, which means your solution was ineffective, which means you didn't do your job. So Nobel Prize is a fake Nobel Prize. So stop pretending, right? So you have to have change management as part of a must-have skill and knowledge for solution architects. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is application lifecycle management. So you need to understand and know about ALM. ALM is the process of implementing functionality effectively and responsibly into an organization, right? Following a process in a most simplified fashion. It could be a development environment where you introduce functionality, you export into a testing environment, sometimes called UAT for user acceptance testing environment, sometimes just called testing or QA environment. Sometimes I've seen that before. But you have a QA environment where you introduce functionality for people to test to make sure that it satisfies the requirements that you are going for. And once that test is passed, which can take a couple rounds, right? It can come back, you tweak something, it re-import and so on, and keep testing. Then you follow that into production. You finally introduce it into production. There's a methodology for that. Every partner out there has kind of their way of doing that. And on top of that, one reason why I don't push for a single way of doing things, and I mentioned the simplest one, which is dev to Q&A to production. I mentioned that because I've talked to many partners and many customers in the past, and they all have different ways, all effective, by the way, to process ALM or to process through their application lifecycle management. So just follow a process. Typically, what I like to do is I like to ask the customer if they already have an application lifecycle management they follow. And I know some people, put pause on the episode right now so they can smash their fist against the wall because they can even imagine asking a customer what ALM process you follow to see if I follow the same one, right? A lot of partners just push their own best practices into the customer, but I like asking. Just like when it comes to data integration technologies, I like asking the customer, right? I don't like pushing for one over the other. And I love some of the companies that create this solution and the people who created this solution. I love it. I promote them. I think they're great, but I don't tell the customers like, oh, what data technology, integration technology do you use? Oh, we use A. And I'm like, nah, that's awful. Let's use B. I'm never going to do that. Right? I need to use what's effective for my solution. And for me, effectiveness means that the customer can own it. So if you're already following a methodology and I can adjust to it, then perfect. Now, if you ask the customer, hey, what's your application lifecycle management methodology like? Like, how are you implementing change into your organization? They say, we just modify production and that's it. Like we just, Friday night, we get together, have a couple beers after everybody left the office. We go and customize production. And then Monday, there it is. The changes. Obviously, you can't really go with that. You can't really support, a poor ALM strategy. But if they have a solid strategy. Like if they come and say, oh, we use Azure DevOps. Cool. If you don't use Azure DevOps today, well, learn how to use it, right? And follow that. You should probably know how to use it already, but if you don't, learn how to use it and use it. I worked with a company recently. They use Trello for their ALM. Everything they have different boards and how they process change. They plan for it. People approve them, whatever. Cool. Let's use Trello. I am very, very flexible because my job is to make sure the solution is effective, right? If I talk to a customer and they say, we have 8 environments, and on one environment we implemented, the other environment we test performance, the other environment we test security, cool, let's do it. Let's use the 8 environments. Don't push it into customers as long as you have the understanding of what ALM is about and you can adjust yourself to the process they follow. As long as you see that it's a good process, then they don't have to follow your process. You can adjust as a professional. You can adjust your process and follow theirs. All right, number 9, and this one is I think this one is the least the one that I'm going to encounter the least when it comes to solution architects out there not having it. This is by far the most common, but still I think that is important to have on the list, which is industry expertise. So number 9 is industry expertise. Look, if you're a solution architect and you're implementing Dynamics 365 for a customer, that means you're creating solutions to their business challenges. And you cannot create solutions to business challenges if you don't know the business. Simple as that. Or the kind of business that they're trying to solve challenges for. Now, you don't have to work on a vertical in order to have industry knowledge. For example, and I talked about this on the video that I did with Seth about becoming a solution architect, I have personally attended training for sales that apply to anyone. And we had, I think there were about 16 of us in the training, maybe a little bit less, maybe 12 to 14 people. But on that thing, I remember I had somebody who worked for a law firm. I remember I had 2 or 3 people who sold medical devices. I had two people that did something with plastics or plastic containers or something like that. So we had all kinds of different people in there, and they all received the same training because sales is sales. Now, there's a bunch of sales methodologies out there. I talked about the fact that I went through Sandler training, but there's Challenger. There's several other ones out there that you can go and take. But for me, if I'm going to be implementing solutions to sales challenges, I need to know about sales, period. Not for just that one industry, but if I'm going to be focusing at a horizontal level, I need to have horizontal sales training level expertise. Same with customer service, same with field service, right? If you're going to be implementing field service for, let's say, cable companies like DirecTV and AT&T and whatever, you have in the country you're listening from, right? If you're going to be doing that, then you should know both things, field service and television, whatever company, telecommunication companies expertise, understanding what kind of challenges companies like that have. So you can then create solutions for it. If you work in vertical markets, like law firms, like banking, like real estate, whatever it is, you need to have industry expertise on those verticals. So once again, whether you have industry expertise horizontally, like sales and customer service and so on, or you have vertical knowledge like banking, real estate, whatever, then you need to have industry expertise. You cannot call yourself a solution architect just because you know how to create entities and fields and use Power Apps and model-driven applications. That's not how it works. You have to have some kind of industry expertise. You must have it. If you don't have it, you can call yourself a functional consultant all you want because you know how to add fields and entities. And by the way, I was a functional consultant before I was a solution architect, so I have nothing against functional consultants. But in order for you to be effective at creating a solution, you need to have that industry expertise. The final item on our list as we approach 45 minutes here, or 44 minutes or so on this episode, is number 10, leadership and the ability to take ownership. This is a must-have as a solution architect. And if you have attended training, solution architecture training with me, which I do about twice a year or so, and some years I've done it 3 or 4 times, which has been really, really lucky. And I get to work with solution architects out there or functional consultants making the transition to solution architects. If you've taken any of those trainings in the past, you know how important it is for me that you are a leader in the project, that you take ownership of the success of the project, which is in all areas, right? And we talked about the fact that you need, your number one goal is to create an effective solution, not to finish the document that has, a bunch of check boxes of requirements that you have to finish. Add these fields, do these things. Like, oh, did I finish the requirements? Yes. That means it's successful, right? No, because you can finish 42 pages worth of requirements and your solution is awful. Your ability to check boxes on a list has nothing to do with your ability to be effective as a solution architect. So leadership and the ability to own the success of the project from beginning to end is a must-have as a solution architect. And you have to be really good at raising red flags. If it doesn't look like whatever you're doing is going to be successful or effective, you need to raise a red flag and say, hey, I know the customer paid for this. I know that they're expecting this solution, but that's not going to work. No one is going to adopt that. No one is going to use that. And if I look back at all the times that I've, I guess, lost money or lost a customer because I would refuse to do what they wanted, I sleep perfectly at night knowing that even the years and the months that I've struggled to find work because I passed on work that I disagree with, I feel completely fine with that. I think I've talked about this in the past. I had a customer, and for some reason, it always seems to be from Florida. When I have customers that I decide not to move forward with them because they're not a good match for the solution I want for them. One of them, a company that they have a bunch of different locations, like, and this is hard for people that live outside the U.S., but in the U.S. we have like this clinics where you go and it's not an emergency, but it's also not a doctor's office. It's like a little clinic. Like if, like last time I went, I went scuba diving and I got water trapped in my ear. So I developed this like ear infection or whatever. So it's not an emergency room thing, but I noticed like my ear was hurting. So I went into the clinic and they look at it and say, yeah, you have an ear infection. Take this antibiotics. Boom. 7 days later, I'm 100% perfect, ready to go back on the water, right? So those clinics right here, I did, I talked to a customer in Florida that was doing this. They had a bunch of locations. The locations, even though they were under the same ownership, they were all operating like they were their own office, right? So like somebody will visit location A, they will go to location B and be like, how can I help you? You're brand new to us. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? I came to you guys. Okay, it was another location 4 blocks away or whatever, but I came like 2 weeks ago and you have no record of me at all, that I was here, that who's my name, what's my address, insurance information, nothing. I'm brand new to it, right? So this company wanted to implement a solution that all of the locations can use to at least keep track of patients and visits, like not their medical history and stuff, because obviously that's against, the rules and regulations for keeping track of medical records, but at least so we know who it's visiting the office and when they stopped and whatever, just a customer database, and to be able to follow up with those customers too. They wanted the ability to set up something like tasks and stuff. So after the meeting, they will call them 3 days later to follow up on them, or a day later, and then whatever it was. I don't remember the exact details, but I remember talking to this guy who was the owner of it was a single guy owning the location. They had something like 13 locations, and they were going crazy because they were struggling with it. And he just couldn't comprehend the idea behind, leveraging a software as a service solution where you pay every month. And he said, no, but I just want to pay and own it forever. And I'm like, well, but that's not how it works. This is something that is hosted in the cloud, and here's all of the benefits of having it hosted in the cloud. This is what you're paying for, which he didn't disagree with, but he disagreed with the fact that this will be potentially a bill for life. And I'm like, so how do you guys pay for electricity? How do you pay for cleaning services? How do you pay? Like, there's stuff that you just pay for life. Like it's non-negotiable. You can't just call the electrical company and be like, "Can I just own the power forever?" Like it doesn't work like that, right? So that deal, and it was a pretty massive deal because they wanted a portal for doctors to be able to check in and report that they were coming. I mean, it was pretty complicated. It was a really sweet project. I was excited about it, but once he didn't see eye to eye, he was sort of like, no, I want like a custom on-prem solution or whatever, like developed for our. No, it's just, we don't see eye to eye on it. I see this solution being in Dynamics. I see mobile clients, people checking in when they visit the office on an iPad, just this is my name, checking in. I see it as a completely different thing. And, I had to let go of it. The other one was a company in Miami, actually. They had 4 employees and they wanted to implement on-prem. Like, what are you talking about? You guys have 4 people. Let's go online. No, we have $30,000 approved to buy the servers and we want to be on-prem. And they did something like air conditioning repair. Like it wasn't like they were dealing with military secrets over here. They're like they don't want to put like the atomic secrets we don't want to put in the cloud because hackers will steal the information. No, these was like they did something common. And I'm not saying that air conditioning repairs is stupid or anything like that, but I remember the I don't even remember the exact business because it was so inconsequential. It was something simple like I said, repairing air conditioning systems, or I think selling dryer and washers or dishwashers. It was something super, super simple that should have been online. I think they would have been a great candidate for field service, especially because it was a very, very small company, but like 4 people or 5 people, something like that. Most of them were technicians, like going on site, either installing the devices or troubleshooting them, maintaining them, or whatever. And one person who was the owner and the salesperson and customer service and director of first impressions. Like one person did everything at the office, and then everybody else was out of the office. And I just couldn't comprehend how this company did not understand that online was the right way for them. So for me, any solution that was not CRM online or Dynamics 365 online with field service and my vision of what my solution would be for this company, anything outside of that would not be effective. Now, is that true? Is that a reality? Can I say that for certain? No. Some other smart solution architect, or maybe not so smart solution architect, doesn't matter, can come in and design a solution on-prem that will rock their world. And hopefully they did, because I didn't end up working with them. Hopefully they found someone that helped them and took their money. I think I sent them to Jerry Weinstock, if I'm not mistaken. So sorry about that, Jerry. I gave him your information. But, hopefully somebody out there took them and delivered the solution that they wanted to pay for on-prem. But it was just not my vision. I couldn't be a good leader if I was willing to just bend over backwards and do whatever the customer says. And we dealt with this. We had an episode, I think it was something like 33 or whatever, where we had an episode about dealing with confrontation. And Patrick Lewis, who was my guest on that show, he was talking about, what happens with customers want to not take your advice. They say, this is what we want no matter what. And you're going to do what I say because I pay you. And how he switches into a mode and says, well, I wanted to be your partner, but if all you want me to be is your vendor and you just want to pay me to do work, then I'm going to be the best vendor ever. I'm going to just do exactly what you want. And, just fully knowing, both of us fully knowing that this is probably not going to end well, right? Because you're refusing my advice. Whereas I think, again, that you need to have that skill set of being a leader and taking ownership of the situation and delivering an effective solution. And by the way, this is not just about functionality. I know that I've been talking about functionality a lot, but this is not just about functionality. It also includes time management. It also includes expense management if you're going on site or doing work or paying, involving external contractors to do some work, understanding the repercussions of that. So it goes beyond that. I think that, being a good leader is to being there on time. If you're responsible to do something, do it on time, deliver when it's expected of you. All of that is part of that. So leadership and the ownership of the success of the project is a must-have for solution architects as well. So once again, There are some good ones that didn't make it to the list. Maybe I should have extended this and make a top 15 or top 20 or something like that, because there was a lot more. But I wanted to really get a concise list, my top 10 things solution architects must know, in order to, call themselves solution architects and actually do the job as a solution architect. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next one, as I mentioned, will be the top 10 overrated skills for solution architects. So I want you to tune into that and give me your feedback and tell me. I think that some of you will find the things that I might call overrated should be on the must know list, and things that I say must know, you would put it on the overrated list. That's all good. I want to hear your feedback. Send me an email, info@crmmvppodcast.com. Shoot me a tweet, either at my Twitter account at Gus Gonzalez 2 or the CRM MVP podcast Twitter account. Obviously, subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm surprised about the fact that we have about half of the people that listen to the podcast in terms of subscribers. We're putting in a ton of stuff out there, at least a weekly video. Some weeks we put 2-3 videos out there. I try to make them all short. That's why we have a 2-Minute Tuesday series. But go ahead and subscribe. It also tells YouTube that you're liking what you're seeing, and it helps us create more content and understand what people like, because I see the views, right? I see the views in all these videos. I see that some videos get a bunch of views, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting that people want to know about that. But then I would create a video with something that I think is interesting and gets very, very poor views. So I'm like, okay, I guess people don't want to listen to that. So you watching and subscribing help me create better content for stuff that you want to listen to or you want to watch in terms of videos on YouTube. Do you want me to be on camera? Do you enjoy it better when I'm just showing my screen? Do you want both? Like, just tell me what you want. Again, I'm here to serve you, and I want to use my time wisely to deliver content that would create the most impact and the most value for the community. As always, obviously subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so on anywhere you listen to podcasts. Apple Podcasts, I guess, is now called. It's no longer iTunes, right? iTunes is gone. Google Play. I personally like to use Overcast. That's just the app that I use. But we are even on. We're in a bunch of different platforms out there, so you can even stream us in your common music streaming services. If you tell Alexa to play CRM MVP podcast, it will probably play it. So go ahead and try it and let me know how that goes. But again, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you on episode 60, and hope you enjoy that one too. See you then.